thank you so much for joining us. Today, I have a really special guest, special for a couple of reasons, in my opinion. The first reason is because of his content. Card collectors out there will know him as She Blinded Me with Refractors. He has his own YouTube channel, and you can also find him on Instagram. And I highly recommend you look at his pages if you haven't already. He's got some really awesome content and a nice collection. But he's also special in my opinion because he is a fellow Oklahoma Cityan. I think that's the proper way probably to say it still. For those who don't know, I grew up in Oklahoma City and spent the first 35 years of my life in the Oklahoma City, Norman area. I also went to school at OU, so I was there in that whole area for quite a long time. And Annie, you are a fellow Oklahoma City as well, and you're a big Thunder fan and OU fan from what I gather, correct?
Absolutely, man. If you live here in Oklahoma City, it's hard not to be a Thunder fan at least. And then there's a little bit of a split as far as colleges go with OU and OSU, but I think OU is the majority winner.
Yeah. Yeah, well, like I said, I went to OU, so OU is still like that's my fandom. That's where it resides still. And then I've been a basketball fan my whole life. But when I was a kid, and if you had told me that there would be an NBA team located in Oklahoma City, I would have told you you're crazy. It's like there's no way that that's going to happen. The best that we ever got when I was growing up was maybe a couple exhibition games every few years, and then we had a CBA team for a while, and I that was probably as good as it was going to be in my opinion for a long time. So to get an NBA team and to get a good one with some really amazing talented players to root for just was beyond my wildest dreams as a kid.
Yeah, we got a little taste of it during Hurricane Katrina
Mhm.
when New Orleans came here for like 2 years. And it was cool because that just so happened to be Chris Paul's rookie year, the
Yep.
first year they were here. So it was cool to, get a taste of it. And then I think once the NBA saw the fans' reaction to the team and how supportive that we were as a city, I think that's, kind of what really snowballed it all. I mean, it was a super unfortunate incident, obviously, but I think that kind of cleared the path for us to actually get a team of our own.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember going to a couple of those Oklahoma City Hornet games with Chris Paul. Those were a lot of fun just to have that little taste of NBA action in our city, and to watch Chris Paul as a young player was really a lot of fun. So is that what kind of started your collecting? Was it you being a fan of the Thunder and you kind of got into it that way, or was it just the other way around? Were you already into collecting cards before then? What kind of got you started, and what are kind of the things that you enjoy collecting for those who don't know?
Well, I actually started when I was a kid. So I'm 43 years old. I started when I was like 8 years old.
Hmm.
And I can still remember the very first pack of cards that I got was actually I was on the way home from a baseball game, a little league baseball game, and my mom, we stopped at this gas station and I got me and my brother both got a couple of packs of 1987 Topps baseball.
Hmm.
We would really study the backs of the cards, the statistics. We like to make up little games to play. We'd set lineup, all kinds of like little neat stuff like that. So baseball cards is like how I actually got into it. Um, and oddly enough, like when the Thunder first came here, like I mean, I was a super huge fan of the team, but I didn't really gravitate to the cards of the players until later on. I was like collecting different stuff during that period of time. And it wasn't really until like when Kevin Durant decided to leave the Oklahoma City Thunder, that's when I kind of decided, you know what? I'm gonna start collecting Russell Westbrook. It was kind of like I've joked with people before. It was almost like a spite PC.
Your heart went all in for Russ.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it went all in, and I've actually got like this was really the first Westbrook card that I got, and this was like in I guess 2016. This was like the first big card of his that I got, and that's the Topps Chrome Refractor,
Hmm.
2008. So I got that one, and that one still to this day like is like a pop 4 in a PSA 10. It's like super hard to get these well centered.
Yeah.
So I was happy to grab this one when I did. Obviously the prices were, much different back then across the board. So yeah, that's one of the my favorite cards in the collection. So I'm glad that I got that one when I did.
Good. Yeah. No, and I tell people too, like, I mean, I you can ask any Oklahoma City Thunder fan, especially those who are true Oklahoma Cityans, that yeah, Kevin Durant will always be the most talented player that will probably ever play for the Oklahoma City Thunder. But if you ask where most Thunder fans' hearts will always be with, it'll be with Russ. And I think most true Thunder fans that are collectors will probably side with collecting more Russell Westbrook stuff as opposed to Durant stuff at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean Durant is obviously more popular on a national level just because, like you mentioned, the talent is undeniable. But yeah, people, if you live here in Oklahoma City and you're a fan of the team, if you're a fan of the name on the front of the jersey, you don't like that name Durant.
No, I
That's just the way
still
it is.
yeah, I still have one big Kevin Durant rookie auto in my collection. I had a lot more of his stuff in the past that I've since traded on or sold from since then, and didn't feel bad about whatsoever.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
I was super upset whenever he left. I mean, like I had a bunch of Kevin Durant t-shirts and I mean I threw them all away like that week.
that was a rough Fourth of July weekend for many Oklahomans.
Yeah, he ruined our 4th of July, man. That
Yeah,
was why the 4th of July? Because every year I still think about that on the 4th of July. I think about that day.
it's hard not to. Yeah, because it totally ruined everyone's day, and yeah, for it to occur on a holiday when no one was really doing anything except for hanging out with friends and being off work and nothing else much else going on, but the news broke and it just killed everyone for yeah, ruined that holiday pretty much for all time for all Oklahomans.
Yeah, it was rough, but we've recovered since then, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to your collection, what do you like to collect? So getting some Russell Westbrook stuff got the ball rolling. So what have you been focusing on quite a bit since then?
So with Russell Westbrook, like I realized early on that with the number of sets that they put out these days and all the different parallels, like there's no way to be like a player collector in the way that people used to be, where you try to get every card of theirs. So I
Right.
knew that wasn't going to be a possibility. Like even if you had all the money in the world, you just can't track down everything that they have these days. So I tried to be pretty focused on what I wanted to get. I started off buying I think let's see, I bought this card pretty early on. This is his 2013 Prism Gold.
Hmm.
I got that card early on. So then I decided, you know what, I'd like to try to get all of his Prism Golds. And at the time, I think this is the most that I've actually paid for any of the Prism Golds that I have, and this one was like $300. And it actually didn't seem as cheap at the time as what it probably does now, but it was relatively affordable. So since then, I've really focused on, some of his rare stuff like the Prism Golds, his Topps Chrome Gold refractors. Like he only has two of those because Topps Chrome was kind of on the way out whenever he was coming in. And then this was my recent pickup from the National.
Hmm.
That's the 2008 Exquisite Rookie Patch Auto. And one of the things that doesn't really get discussed a lot with Westbrook is the fact that he hasn't signed any autograph cards since I want to say like 2011.
Hmm.
So it's been like 11 years since he signed anything. So there's not a lot of autographs of him out there. So I only have like a couple of autographs. I'm not like a huge autograph guy, but I just think it's in this day and age where most of these younger players are signing so many cards. He's actually one of the players. He only signed for maybe like 3 years.
Yeah.
So to me, that kind of makes it more challenging, and I'm always up for a good challenge.
Yeah, no, I tell that to a lot of people too. It's like, there actually aren't a ton of Westbrook autographs, especially on card autographs. There are only a few. He only did that 1 year for Upper Deck Exquisite. That was the only year that he was able to sign for that particular brand. So,
Yeah.
and Upper Decks basically stopped doing pro on card autographs after that for the most part. And so you're not going to find him in a ton of high end Upper Deck products, and you're not going to find him obviously even in a ton of high end Panini products because they didn't really come around until 2012, and he was basically done autographing at that point for whatever reason. I still don't even know the exact reason, but
You
he's
know,
just
I'm not
decided to
really
stop. Yeah.
I'm not really sure either what the reason is, but I think that's I think going forward, that could be a trend for more and more players because these guys are making so much money, and you start thinking about it, and are some of these guys going to come to the conclusion that it's not really worth their time to like sign some of these autographs? Because I can't imagine that the money that they're getting is, I mean, it's big money, but it's probably not that big to them based on other things that they do, right?
Yeah, it's not as big as their other endorsement deals, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't know how Fanatics is going to handle that going forward. Because they say, at least they've claimed, that one of the big things about their deals with the player associations is that they will have those player unions more involved in their contracts and whatnot going forward. But I don't know what that's going to break down for each individual player necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how some of those are handled going forward.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And so, yeah, and I noticed also on Instagram you picked up his Topps Chrome Rookie Refractor Gold a
Yeah.
while back. That's a big one. For those who don't know, just back then you only had what, 3 or 4 refractors in the
Yeah.
top
I think
products, and that was besides the red, which was number to 5 in that product. The gold is the what, number to 50 or whatever,
number
and
50.
so
Yeah.
they're so hard to find. Especially this day and age, they don't pop up very often.
Right. Yeah. I was happy to get that one. I got that one in a trade at the Dallas card show. Probably, I don't know, maybe like 6 months ago or something like that. It's been a little while, but yeah, that was one that you kind of, once these prices get to a certain point, you kind of get priced out on some of this stuff as far as buying it. But if you've been collecting for a long time, you have a little bit of what I like to call equity built up in other cards that you have. So
Mm.
I don't mind, moving some of that stuff if I can get something that like that I would otherwise, I wouldn't be able to buy that just outright. I
Right.
mean, at the time, I think those were, they're down now, but they were over like $10,000 at the time, and it's it's a lot different than it used to be. The hobby's a lot different in a lot of ways.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would say I got really heavily back into the hobby around 2012. And yeah, I built up a good collection of, like, high graded rookie cards and things of that nature. So, when the prices spiked these past couple of years, I still had a lot of those that I bought back in 2012, 13, 14, 15, all those years ago. And so I had good cards that I had very little personal equity in, but where the values of those spiked like crazy. So I had things that were easy to transfer to other things and trade out into other things that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to buy on my own. So some of the things that I'm really particularly interested in now, the vintage autos and on card rookie autos that I am really focusing on now, I was able to obtain all of those up to this point, basically with things that I already previously had. So it was nice to already have those things.
Yeah, and I did a podcast one time with one of my buddies, and we were talking about the topic was being a minimalist collector, and just kind of being very focused and everything. And one of the points that I made is I've gotten to the point now where things have gotten so expensive that I try to make this kind of like a self-funded hobby, as far as like you try to fund that with other pieces of your collection, because you know uh, some of the stuff is, like I said, it's gotten so high that otherwise I don't think I would be able to continue going on if I didn't already have some of that equity built up in some of these cards that you got early on, and we weren't really thinking about them necessarily as investments. And you kind of joke around with people that the people that actually benefited the most from the hobby boom were the people that had been collecting all along, and they weren't even really that concerned about the money.
Yeah, they're just collecting what they love to collect. And then all of a sudden, 2020 and 2021 comes around, and man, you'd be surprised at what they go for all of a sudden. There's just so much more attention to the hobby and to the values of these things. And yeah, like, when I was talking to my first interviewee about his collection of signed 1933 Gaudis, and how he didn't really tell anyone for the longest time about what he was collecting just privately. He just kind of was a private person about it. And then all of a sudden he just kind of realized, man, there's just like this whole basically industry out there of revolving around these cards and these collections that just wasn't available just a few years ago. And so he felt like it was a good time for him to come out and be more public about it. And I kind of feel the same way. I'm much more public about things I've collected over the last few years than I ever was prior to that. And it's just, yeah, completely different from what it was not that long ago.
Yeah, and I think with people that recently got into the hobby, I think they I think they have to be a little bit careful as far as like what type of content they're watching, because kind of to your point with that gentleman, I can't, what was his name?
He just goes by, yeah, sign 1933 Gaudi.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
because I watched that, and I think there's a lot more people out there that do things that way.
Hmm.
Like the people, like they see something that's a good value, and the smart thing is they're not going to come on like YouTube or Instagram and tell the world about how great of a thing it is. They're just going to quietly pick up those cards, stack them away, and then, once something happens, they might come out and talk about it. But you have to be careful with some of these newer like YouTube channels that are giving advice, and especially the people that really, I mean, they haven't really been around that long. I kind of think about it the same way I would think about sports gambling. You always see these sites where people are selling their picks and stuff like that. I'm like, if they were that good at picks, why wouldn't they just play them? Why would they be telling everybody about them?
Right.
So you gotta be careful with that kind of stuff, I think.
Yeah, and we're not going to name any names out here, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of content out there. I mean, you don't have to search very long to find a lot of people out there that are just basically pushing out, buy, sell type of content
Yeah.
that's been really popular these past couple of years. But I'm still more interested in people who are actually talking about the history of these cards, the reasons why they are actually scarce or rare, and not necessarily like manufacturally scarce or rare, even just reasons
Right.
why they're scarce or rare for other reasons, and just talking about the hobby with the love and passion as opposed to a monetary assessment of it.
Yeah,
um,
for sure.
yeah, but like I said, won't name names, but but yeah, and I've noticed you've gone on several other content creators here lately. I apologize, I can't remember his name with Bench Clear Media.
Oh, Mike.
Mike, thanks. Yeah, I
Uh-huh.
thought it was Mike, but I didn't want to be misspoken about it.
Yeah.
You've been on his show quite a bit lately, and he's been active with the cardboard. What is it? Cardboard Chronicles, or what is it called?
No,
Chasing Cardboard.
Tasting Cardboard is
Yeah,
their show. Yeah.
yeah. And that's the content. That's content that I recommend to a lot of people because it's great. They just literally go around and just talk to people about their collections and give like proper assessments of those things and the history of those things. So
Yeah, man, it's like a TV show.
yeah, exactly. It's well done, and so
They do a good
it's
job.
and I'm glad to see you like talking to Mike frequently
Oh
and
yeah, Mike's one of my best friends. So like I've been to his house several times. We always travel to the National together and stuff.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine you see him quite a bit when you go down to the Dallas show and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah. He lives in Fort Worth. So yeah, it's pretty close.
Yeah. How often do you go out to shows? Do you do it frequently as a seller
Um,
or buyer or both or whatever?
like the Dallas show, they have that like every 2 months, and it's actually going on right now. And I wasn't able to go this time. I'll probably go in November. I mean, up until these last two, I'd probably been to like, I don't know, maybe like 6 or 7 in a row.
Okay.
And that's a great show, and
Yeah.
it's not really that far for me per se. Like it's 3.5 hours or so, give or take. So yeah, that's the main show that I go to, and like I said, it's every 2 months. Other than that, I really just go to that Dallas show and then the National. I would like to go to more shows, but just time and money. I mean, the travel is so expensive these days. Not, I mean, forget about the cards, but just the travel of getting there and the lodging if you're going to these bigger shows. And there's a few smaller shows here in Oklahoma City that I
Yeah.
need to probably look more into as far as just, going and hanging out, saying hi to people and seeing what's there. But
Yeah, I remember going to the Oklahoma City ones for a while. And it's nice, yeah, to be in close proximity to the Dallas show and just that whole Dallas Fort Worth area. There always seems to be quite a few things going on around there. Out here in Central Arkansas, there's a couple of small shows in the area, and then if you go close to Bentonville, the Bentonville Tulsa area, we're close enough to that I can go out there every so often for one of those big shows out there, and they do some nice shows every so often in those areas. It's quite the drive now for me to get down to Dallas, so it really does take like a real like weekend excursion to be able to go out to that show for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like I've really been spoiled by this Dallas show because, like I said, it's every 2 months. It's only like 3.5 hours away, and it's probably the second largest show in the country. So I
Mm.
mean, if you're able to go to that one every time they have it, and then you have the national, I mean, that keeps you pretty busy as far as shows go. So you don't really need to go to a whole lot of other ones unless you're doing something, like full time or something.
Right. Especially since, like you said, they do it like every 2 months basically. So
Yeah.
it really feels like it's almost back to back. Like when you get back from it, you're like, okay, I got to get ready to go back to it
Yeah.
here.
You start gearing up for the next one.
Yeah. Yeah, I know several dealers who go out to that show all the time now, and it's just like, man, I don't know how you turn around so fast to go back out there every 2 months and still hit several of these other regional shows in between. That's quite, yeah, like you said, pretty much a full time thing to do that.
Yeah, it's a pretty decent split there too. Like I would say probably half of the people might be like, fairly local dealers, but then, there's a lot of people that come from all over the country. It's like a regional show, but it's also somewhat of a national show because there's people, yeah, come from East Coast, West Coast set up. It's a big deal.
Yeah. Well, anything else that's been piquing your interest in your collecting lately, beyond
Um,
your interest in Westbrook and other basketball stuff and whatnot?
Yeah, over the last, I don't know, maybe year and a half or so, maybe 2 years. I don't even know exactly when I started, but I really started to get back into the UFC as far as watching UFC. So then naturally I wanted to start collecting the cards. So I've been able to pick up some pretty cool UFC stuff. I originally started watching it back. I mean, I'm trying to think of the year. It would probably be like maybe '08, somewhere in there, whenever like Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz were like big fighting each other. And so I'm a big fan of like the older guys, Anderson Silva, George St. Pierre, guys like that. I love to watch the new pay-per-views as well, but I don't really collect as many of those guys' cards.
Hmm.
And I've always been a big fan like of the history, particularly in baseball, because I think baseball has probably the most fascinating history because it just goes back so far.
Yeah.
So I've been looking at a lot of different and when I say like vintage baseball, like I even go back further, like the pre-war era is kind of like the stuff that I really like.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff back then, a lot of sets that people don't really know about. So I'm constantly learning new things about different sets. And I know most of the players, but there's some of these sets that are just like oddball sets. And you talked a little bit earlier about scarcity, and there's some real scarcity in some of that stuff. And it's not because they necessarily wanted that to be the case. It's just a lot of these cards didn't survive. They were, put in different products, potato chips, ice cream, all kinds of stuff. So they didn't make it. But that stuff is super fascinating to me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, it's fascinating. Like, literally, some of them were even packaged with loaves of bread,
Yeah.
and just to imagine something coming out of a package of bread and it's actually surviving like 70, 80 years later or whatever. And yeah, it's very rare that those type of things survive in good condition, especially.
Yeah.
Uh,
So this card here, this is a 1928 Harrington's ice cream Babe Ruth. And the cool thing about this on the back, it says 1 gallon of Harrington's ice cream will be delivered free to the holder of a complete set of 60 different baseball stars. So you'd complete the whole set of 60 cards and you'd get a free gallon of ice cream. I mean,
mhm.
how cool is that? Terrible deal, but it's like there's just so many unique things about cards back then that you just don't see in today's world.
Right. Yeah, it's a big business now, and back then it just wasn't. It was an afterthought for the longest time, and literally it was just made by, toy companies, gum companies, just to sell their gum products or their other
Yeah.
products. And
Those were just promotional items.
yeah, and so you're right, and so a lot of those didn't survive over the years, and yeah, that's one of the things that I've really just looked into heavily these past few years of like just going after those things that just were very naturally scarce for those reasons. And then even some of the well-known names like Fleer,
Mhm.
they were a pretty small company for a long time that were just barely surviving, trying to make it in terms of producing sports cards with their products. And but they couldn't compete with companies like Topps. Topps had like basically monopolized the baseball card game, especially. They just had the things were done differently back then with their deals. Like it wasn't like just one big deal with players unions. They basically went out and had individual deals with each individual teams and players pretty much. So nobody else could get into the game. And there were a lot of lawsuits between Fleer and other companies and Topps throughout the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s because of that. So anyway, so yeah, so even a company like Fleer had a hard time really getting off the floor running. And so a lot of their first products that they put out, like 61 Fleer basketball and the 60 like Ted Williams baseball set that they did,
Mhm.
because they couldn't get rights to do any actual
Yeah, it was like a
current.
1959 Fleer set.
Yeah, they couldn't do current players, so they went back and did retired players, and they did some of the first sets that just basically did retired players. And but they didn't produce very many of them because of their status as a company at that time. So anyway, so yeah, it's like it's
There's a fascinating book, and I can't think of the name of it, but it's basically about the big battle that Topps and Bowman had back
mhm.
in the 50s. It's an interesting read. So if anybody out there is looking for a good read, go find that book because it's pretty cool just to kind of hear the stories of the battle for these, players and stuff to put in your products.
Yeah, yeah. So I get really interested and nerdy about the history, not just the history of the sport itself, but the history of some of these companies, especially back in the day, and some of the things that they produce. And like you said, a lot of oddball things that were produced during the 60s and 70s because of these weird little contractual things that exist now that didn't really exist back then, like you can't get away with a lot of the things that were produced
Yeah, I
back
don't
during
know
the
about
time
you,
period.
but I absolutely love like going back and researching these different things because yeah, you'll see a card and you'll be like, now why was it that way? So you start, doing a deep dive into the set and you're like, oh, okay, I see what they did here. And just
Yeah.
fascinating, man. I just love doing that kind of stuff and learning about new stuff, new sets.
Yeah, like why does 69 Tops have players with jerseys that are worn backwards? That's
Backwards, yeah.
why is there a random icy bear basketball set in the mid 70s? Like yeah, like
1972.
really interesting fun things to really do deep dives in for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I really just wanted to thank you so much for joining me today in this interview. Once again, if you haven't followed his channel or his Instagram, it's She Blinded Me with Refractors on both those platforms. Is there anything else you want to push out? Anything? Are you selling or doing anything on any of the platforms that you want to make sure everyone knows about?
No, not really. I mean, like I'm always, interested in just various things. So, I mean, like if you have something that you think I might be interested in, always just reach out. The worst I could say is no, right? So, yeah.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I appreciate it, Kurt. It's been fun to talk to you. We've kind of messaged back and forth a few times about different things. So
Yep.
good to put a face with the screen name and all that stuff. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for joining me. And hopefully we'll get to continue this conversation sometime in the future.
Yeah, man, for sure.